Hi everyone, welcome to Metrics Matter, using assessment analytics to become a smarter organization. We're really excited that you joined us today for our live webcast. I'm really looking forward to it. Hosting today we have Julie Otremba. She has over 14 years of experience working with external HR and talent measurement teams, and currently she's the Director of Talent Management at PAN, partnering with internal teams and clients to design and recommend talent measurement solutions. Her responsibilities include developing and executing talent measurement strategies and programs, promoting human capital industry insights and best practices, and building trusted advisor relationships, and monitoring program success metrics against client objectives. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you, Christy, for that introduction, and welcome and good afternoon or good morning, depending on the time zone that you're calling from. Thank you for joining us today to learn best practices for using assessment analytics to drive talent strategy. First, I want to begin with an introduction to the importance of our topic today. Too often, assessment data sits in silos, and the right metrics aren't put in place to easily translate their impact on performance. We believe this is important. Paired with an analytics program, assessments can really be a bridge to creating an ongoing feedback loop that informs an organization's talent strategy and charts a path to high performance. So today, we'll offer guidance and provide you with actionable strategies to create ongoing feedback and maximize success for your assessment metric initiative. Okay, so what you'll learn today to set the stage. First, we'll talk about assessments, what they are, when to use them, and why organizations should use them. Then we'll discuss what role validity of an assessment can play from a strategic perspective in the world of HR. Next, we'll move on to the core of the presentation by introducing you to the concept of the assessment validity feedback loop and its importance of using assessment data. Then we'll move on to the benefits of using analytics and feedback to inform your talent and assessment strategy. We'll also share examples about how this process has been used. And then we'll finish with best practices and how to make the most out of analytics. Before we move on, we have a few housekeeping details. Please save your questions to the end, or you can certainly post them now, but we'll save about 5 to 10 minutes of our time today to answer questions, and you can post them on the message in your screen. Okay. So I'm sure most of you are sitting in on this know that there are a variety of assessments including personality, cognitive test, situational to measure soft skills, knowledge test, integrity, structured interviews, job simulations, the list goes on for what kind of assessments are out there. When thinking about when to use assessments, there are typically two purposes. One is selection and the other is development. In the selection situation, assessments such as personality and cognitive ability, biodata, skills and knowledge, and even integrity tests are most often presented early on in the selection process to help screen a long list of candidates for a more time-consuming part of the selection process like an interview, or to enhance the information a hiring team has to make more objective and accurate selection decisions. Other more in-depth assessments such as simulations or structured interviews most often appear later on in the selection process because they either take more time or more cost to complete. In the development arena, however, assessments can be used to inform an organization about a person's skills and experience and are used to identify a person's strengths and information on gap areas with the goal to close those gap areas through targeted development. In these cases, assessment information is used to help inform and develop the person going through the assessment so he or she can perform better in his or her current role or better prepare that person for the next role assignment. So our last question is, why should a company consider using assessments? Well, first, assessments provide a more objective way in which your organization can assess if candidates and employees have the knowledge, ability, skills, and other personal characteristics to be successful for a given role to really help meet your business objectives. Second, assessments are quick, usually quick to administer, and can help streamline a selection process by making automatic decisions and really providing objective information about the candidate. They also can be configured and designed to target exactly what you need in terms of what type of content is presented to either the employee or the candidate, how long that assessment should be, what type of information should be presented back to either the L&D team or the hiring managers, for example. And finally, and most relevant to the main point of today's presentation, is that they can have real business results if a proper assessment analytics strategy has been put into place, which is what we'll be discussing today throughout our time together. As I mentioned earlier, there are a variety of assessments. So assessments can really be versatile tools that can be used to measure a variety of attributes that we talked about already: skills, personality, cognitive ability, leadership potential. At a basic level, we'd like to organize assessments into 4 common types: can do, will fit, and can lead. For example, can do assessments may include cognitive ability and skills tests, and they really give an estimate of someone's real skill level, what they can actually do. Whereas will do assessments measures a candidate's likelihood to engage in different behaviors, both good and bad. These assessments measure beyond what a candidate can do today and provide insight into important traits like ambition and stress tolerance. So let me give you an example between can do and will do. For a healthcare service provider, in order to deliver superior patient care, that person must possess the will do, such as interpersonal communication skills and service orientation, really caring about the patient and their experience, and also the can do, such as technical skills and knowledge appropriate for that role. Third, will fit. Those types of assessments measures how well a person's values, interests, and personality characteristics fit into a workplace environment. And this can assist in hiring more satisfied, committed workers, because when there's a good match to the job, role, or organization, there's a good match all around. And finally, can lead. Assessments such as a 360, a multi-rater assessment, or emotional intelligence really gauges a person's leadership strengths and weaknesses. I want to make a mention as a side note on PAN's website, panpowered.com, and you can see it on the bottom of our screen here. Under our Academy page, we have a free white paper titled The Complete Guide to Assessments. This one is an additional resource to you. This white paper covers questions to consider when adding assessments to your HR practices, a brief review of the types of assessments that we touched upon here today and the difference between hiring and development assessments, and tips for implementing assessments to help improve hiring outcomes and inform on really building a legally defensible process. So we hope you find this resource, and there's other resources on that page available to you as well. You may be thinking, out of the many different types of assessments we just mentioned, which ones are used at different job roles and different levels. So this table that we have here shows the diverse ways in which different types of assessments are used for jobs up and down the organization. For example, basic tests that measure knowledge and skills are used most frequently for entry-level jobs. Assessments that measure multiple aspects are most used in mid-level and first manager roles, followed by executives. And high-stake assessments such as in-person assessment centers are used more often for executive roles, followed by mid-level manager roles. And assessments that measure motivation, we usually see these more for managers and above. The bottom line message here is that assessments can adapt for the specific job level and what is most critical to measure for that job and for your organization. Here's an illustration of how assessments have been proven to impact real organizational concerns such as engagement, overall job performance, and reduction in turnover. As you can see in these graphs, this research is from the Aberdeen Group, and they found that companies who use assessment have a 67% higher engaged workforce, 60% higher in exceeds performance reviews, and 63% higher in retention of high potentials. So now that we've made a strong case on the value of assessments, let's spend a little bit of time talking about validity and how it can be used to measure how assessments are impacting an organization's bottom line. So at a high level, the purpose of Validity is to really connect what assessment claims to measure to actual business-related outcomes. For example, if you've been using an assessment to hire employees and would now like to determine whether that assessment is differentiating between high and low performers, you may want to use a predictive validity approach by taking the assessment scores taken during the hiring process and matching that up with performance metrics such as manager ratings, objective outcomes such as sales quota achieved, customer satisfaction scores, and even productivity on the line if you're in a manufacturing organization. So why should you and HR care about Validity? Well, Validity not only helps demonstrate how your assessments are maximizing the success of your talent management system, but they can also improve the efficiency of your hiring process, as we discussed earlier. They provide much needed legal defensibility, which is really critical, especially if you're a government contractor or under the scrutiny of agencies such as the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs, otherwise known as the OFCCP, or if you're using a lot of assessments to control the massive volume of candidates applying to jobs in your organization. And finally, again, why we're here today, ROI, to demonstrate the return on investment. Is your organization getting more dollars back in terms of improved bottom line metrics or reduced turnover compared to the dollars you're invested? That's an important question, and we're here to help you figure out how you can determine that through best practices we'll share. So now we'll take time out to have a full question from the audience. Please describe your current use of assessments from the options below that you can read, and I'll turn it over to Christy to facilitate this section.
Hi everyone, thank you. You should see a poll pop up on your screen. If you can just choose one, we would very much appreciate it. Okay, Julie, I have about 85% of the people voting. I think I'll just give it just a few more seconds here. All right, it looks like 62% use assessments infrequently, Julie, and 29% use assessments quite a lot. So that is the poll results.
Thank you, and you know, that's really not surprising. So, you know, I hope in the beginning of our webinar today, if people are using assessments infrequently, it gives you an idea of what types of assessments are out there in terms of what they might measure and different types of job roles in which you can use assessments. And like I said, on panpower.com, we do have some resources, and Christy will provide information at the end if you're interested in learning more about assessments and what they can do for your organization beyond just providing information about good hires and people that could be developed in your organization. We'll be able to provide you with that. And 29% use assessments quite a lot, great. And we hope you'll be able to take from this webinar, as we spoke about, ways that you can leverage all the great data you're collecting from the assessments to be a more value-driven organization and how you can use that data going forward. So for those of you who do not have the experience with measuring business outcomes from your assessment program, some of the things presented on this slide should be familiar to you. And for those of you who are new to the measurement area, these are probably outcomes that maybe you've been thinking about that you'd like to improve or change, and are likely things that you can start to think about. So as you can see here, there are multiple outcomes that can be considered when demonstrating the value to your organization and what they're getting out of assessment. So they range from performance indicators shown in burgundy or purple, it looks like burgundy to me, such as customer satisfaction and training outcomes and different types of performance metrics, to employee attitudes, shown in light blue, which can be a predictor of performance outcomes, that is, happier employees are usually more productive, to business concerns, shown in dark blue, which can have a direct impact on your organization's bottom line. So these things would be such as turnover, safety violations, workman comps claims. So the key here is to consider what your end goal is and then determine the best path to getting there through a well thought out talent measurement strategy that will not only think about the outcomes that you want to measure, but how do you actually get that data and how do you use it. So what does a well thought out talent measurement strategy entail? Well, a solid measurement strategy is actually a process. It's not a one-time deal. It's what I say, it's not set and forget. Usually it's a continuous improvement approach where you can really target what are the key factors to consider to measure and what are the impact of your assessment implementations. Obviously, the loop begins with administering your assessments and identifying what outcomes you want to link to those assessments. As you'll probably recall from the previous talent measurement outcomes puzzle slide, outcomes come in all different shapes and sizes, and some of those outcomes may be easier to get your hands on than others. So for example, employee engagement measures may be easier to get due to the fact that most organizations administer engagement surveys on a regular basis. We've really gone from the one-time annual employee engagement surveys to more frequent pulse surveys. A harder outcome to tackle might be something like training outcomes, as it can be hard to track training performance at the individual level. So in summary here, as you formulate your measurement strategy, it's important to consider what are reasonable and feasible outcomes for you to focus on. Worth noting, there can be multiple reasons why your initial measurement study may not pan out, no pun intended, and you didn't need to make adjustments. So perhaps the data was not as clean as you needed it to be to make solid conclusions. Perhaps you ended up with less data than you originally thought would be available. Or perhaps outcomes you originally identified were not as well measured as you had originally planned. So that's why a good measurement approach requires patience and continuous feedback so you can make adjustments to really get the best outcomes. So let me share some examples with you. One company we worked with realized that there was a missed opportunity to collect trainer evaluations for customer service reps after they determined that training outcomes was an important consideration to really demonstrate the validity of their selection process. So how fast a rep was coming up to speed, and did they know what they needed to know at the end of the training to be successful. This actually led the client to engage with their learning and development team and make a simple request to survey trainers after each class was completed and ask them to evaluate the quality of each new hire. This gave our client the opportunity to tie their screening assessments to how new hires were performing in the new hire training. And the good news is that they actually saw improvements in training performance amongst the new hires that were selected using their new assessment program. In case you're maybe still on the fence or wary about the value of using an assessment validity feedback loop to lead you to the best outcomes for your organizations, here are some stats that might sway you towards engaging in a more rigorous measurement strategy or getting stakeholders involved in conversations. So this study found that organizations with a more mature analytics capabilities were 2 times more likely to improve their recruiting efforts and more likely to improve their leadership pipelines. They were 3 times more likely to realize cost reductions as well as efficiency gains. And they were 2 times more likely to improve talent mobility, so moving the right people into the right jobs. So given that we're about halfway through the presentation, I just wanted to provide a recap of key points we've discussed before we move on. So one key point is if you don't go the extra mile and measure the impact of your assessments, your implementation could quickly become an HR initiative with little buy-in or support from the business. Or over time, the business and HR can lose track of why assessments were actually being used in the first place. So why did you want to have the assessment? What types of things were you trying to improve, or what behaviors were you trying to reduce? However, if you do invest the effort to demonstrate ROI of your assessment programs, you can gain greater visibility within the organization by really grabbing the ear of your senior leaders. I mean, What executive isn't concerned about how the company can save more money and improve performance as a result of really implementing better tools? And again, I really think it also empowers HR to have more strategic input on how to optimize the business using this type of data. Now that we've talked about what you could potentially measure, one way to determine the best outcomes to focus on is to think about who is concerned about your assessment strategy. Here are just a few stakeholders that you should or could be considering when building your measurement strategy. And each of these stakeholders will certainly have different concerns and interests. So based on which of these stakeholders you're partnering with, the outcomes on which you focus can differ. So let me give you some examples. Talent acquisition, they're typically interested in eliminating unnecessary screening interviews. They want to save effort and save time. So perhaps your focus here should be on time to hire and turnover. Your hiring managers are typically concerned with decreasing the number of job interviews needed. They really want to get to the best candidates quickly. And they want to have a really great confidence that HR is really getting them the best candidates possible. So perhaps your focus could be here on quality of candidates that are screened in through earlier stages of the process. Training will have concerns about quality of new hires. So similar to the story I shared earlier, your focus could be on the quality of hire, but really from the lens of learning agility or technical skills. Operations is going to be concerned about bottom line outcomes such as productivity, safety, absenteeism. So your focus here should be on the quality of hire, but from a dependability perspective, or perhaps technical skills if they tie into productivity. Customers are going to be concerned about the service they receive and how your new hires are representing your company's offerings. So customer service capabilities and skills are going to be of the utmost concern here. Two stakeholders not listed on here are worth mentioning, and they're legal and senior sponsors, or as I like to say, who's writing the check. For legal, especially if you're a government contract or under the scrutiny of the OFCCP, your general counsel is going to be really concerned with the work that you've done to validate your assessment and demonstrate how job-related it is. As for your senior sponsor, writing a check for, let's say it could be $10,000, $100,000, should be rationalized with a savings bigger than that number. You should be able to demonstrate how your company is producing more than what it's spending on your assessment program. Plus, just think about what you'll achieve if you're able to demonstrate to your senior leadership that for every dollar that is spent, you're getting $10 back due to reduced turnover, higher productivity, and reduced time to hire, and so on. A well-designed assessment analytics program can help cement your role as a strategic contributor to the business, not only by getting a better quality of hire, but really demonstrating that there is actually a return on investment on the dollar spent for your assessment programs. So to make this a little bit more concrete, let's walk through a couple of examples on how the feedback loop can work for two jobs. The first is sales and the second is customer service. So let's say that you've recently put into place an assessment for your sales force that focuses on things like sales orientation, service orientation, learning agility, sociability, positive attitude, and integrity. So now what? Well, if we look at this feedback loop, you'll first want to think through the outcomes that you should think about that could be impacted by using your new assessment. For example, sales orientation should have an impact on sales revenue. Service orientation can impact customer satisfaction. Learning agility can be tied to training success. Sociability and positive attitudes can be tied to supervisor ratings. And integrity could be tied to theft. If all of these outcomes are currently being measured at your company, then great, you're in excellent shape. However, if some of these outcomes currently are not being measured, this could possibly drive you to begin considering whether there are ways in which you might be able to begin to measure things like these if you do have customer service roles. Obviously, in the real world, there are going to be things that you just can't feasibly measure, either because of the time required to collect these metrics or because of the confidentiality issues. So the moral of the story here is do what you can and then see what you can do to gain sponsorship and support from your stakeholders to eventually be able to measure the things that are important to the business. This is where the make adjustments comes into play and is really critical. You can take a first pass at measuring outcomes based on what is readily available to you. You can squeeze whatever you can at that first pass and then present pertinent information to the right stakeholders. I guarantee that your first presentation will leave your audience and your stakeholders with wanting more information. And this really gives you an opportunity to ask for their support to help you get more data, to provide them with even more in-depth analysis and findings that they're interested in. Another point I want to make here is, why we say that we should measure multiple outcomes. Another point is just don't measure something to measure it. Only measure outcomes that are most important to your business and to your stakeholders. And making sure that those outcomes are actually actionable. So if you're going to measure something and report on it, can you actually take action if there's something that needs to be improved or looked into? Now that you've got the gist of how this feedback loop works, I'll go through the slide more quickly. It's the same process, just different context, a customer service role. So this client we worked with, assessment measured competencies such as service orientation, learning agility, problem solving, positive attitude, resilience, and integrity. And then looking at the feedback loop, the outcomes that were impacted by their assessments included customer satisfaction, which was measured by service orientation, training success, which was measured by learning agility, and average handling time and customer call repeats. This is measured by problem-solving ability as well as computer skills. And employee satisfaction was measured by positive attitude. And finally, attendance. This was measured by resilience and integrity. And as you can see, different jobs measure different aspects that are important to that specific role and all have different outcomes. So let's review some best practices for launching an assessment analytics program. First, for assessments, know what you need to measure. You can't hit your target if you don't know what it is. Match assessment processes to needs. So think about and ask yourself, have you done your due diligence to ensure that you're assessing the right things? Use top-notch assessments, and when I say garbage in, garbage out, this goes back to our validation discussion that the assessment must be job-related and it must measure what it says it's going to measure. So having top-notch, high-quality assessments. Second, outcome metrics. Identify what represents value to the business and who is concerned and will be impacted by your assessment strategy and what outcomes are important to them. Use multiple metrics to define success, and again, it's a balance between having the appropriate metrics and then not measuring things that you don't need to measure. So there's no silver bullet, but address your measurement strategy holistically. So you might remember this talent outcomes puzzle slide that we went through. Again, these are example categories of metrics that you can start to look at within your organization depending on the specific role. So going back to outcome metrics, be objective and wary of ratings. So if you know that all of your performance review ratings are on a scale of 3 on a 1 to 5 scale, you're not going to get enough variety or variance to really determine whether the assessment is truly differentiating between top and bottom performers. And be thorough. A measurement strategy is only as good as the data you can produce and gather as part of your analysis. For internal buy-in, you're not alone in all of this. Really leverage your senior sponsors. Someone had to write the check for all of this, right? So really leverage them. And I'm guessing they're as concerned as you are when it comes to demonstrating ROI for your assessment program. Take time to explore and determine what data is out there. Talk to your stakeholders and ask them for direction and support. And finally, setup. Once you've gotten to where you have all the data you need, then determine who in your company might be able to help you make sense of all of it. Or, Pan, we're pretty good at that. We can help. Perhaps someone in finance has great Excel or stat skills and can help make sense of the data. And some organizations, and maybe not your organization, but some have a workforce analytics department that often have people, again, with strong data skills. If not, operations may have data on sales quota, customer satisfaction, average handling time, turnover, etc. Often people don't think about marketing, but marketing is also usually equipped with analysts who are good at making sense out of market research information. So see if you might be able to tag team with someone from that department to evaluate your data. After all, your measurement study and your measurement program truly is a form of marketing. You're marketing your implementation and helping your stakeholders understand the value that they're getting from their assessment. I've often seen companies too, when they do employ a successful assessment program and a successful measurement program, work with their marketing department to help create information that they can share with stakeholders or with other business units that might not be using assessments to really promote how assessment and a good assessment strategy was helpful to other areas in the organization. So a key takeaway here with all this information is that assessment analytics is not a throw things at the wall and see what sticks approach, but rather requires, well thought out strategy and evaluation of what can feasibly be done and what actions need to be taken to make your measurement study as successful as possible. Also, like I said, it's not a set and forget approach. Rather, really continually monitor key metrics to gauge their impact on the business. And keep in mind, if you don't succeed at first, try to use your initial lack of success to influence players in your organization to pitch in and help make your assessment talent analytics a success. After all, they should have a vested interest in achieving the best possible outcomes. So in conclusion, I hope we've been able to get some critical points across over our time today. First, Validity has many benefits for an organization. In addition just to establishing important pieces such as legal defensibility, it's a way in which you can begin to demonstrate ROI. Second, measuring assessment value is not a one-time deal. It's a process that requires continual evaluation and adjustment along the way. Be patient. And third, a good assessment strategy should be well thought out in terms of what is being used, quality of outcome data gathered, interpretation of that information, and the way in which that strategy is rolled out. So I say in the bottom, go forth, assess, evaluate, and monitor. So that concludes our formal presentation. I believe, Christy, we've got time for a couple questions that I can answer.
Yes, we do.
Good. So it looks like one of the questions that we got was, what type of metrics do companies typically collect? Well, again, that depends on the job role and what data is being collected and what type of access you have to that data. For example, we talked about customer service. We often see things that are important to knowing if that customer service team is doing a good job servicing their clients. So clients usually look at average handling time, attendance, customer satisfaction, even supervisory ratings of performance. And what we've seen lately are more attention to training outcomes. So during the ramp-up period and when they were training, how fast did they come up to speed? Do they have the knowledge they need once they are through their ramp-up period? Versus like a healthcare provider. So they might be looking at patient metrics such as patient experience satisfaction ratings or other metrics such as attendance and safety. Okay, another question is, we'd like to do this for many of our assessment programs. We can't do it all at once. Where do you recommend we start? That's a great question. I'd recommend you start by looking at a few different variables, perhaps what jobs are most important to your organization. So the jobs that have big impact to the organization, that could be a sales job, that could be a customer service job. Sometimes your customer service reps, touch 99% of your clients. So that could be high impact to your organization, or leadership. So, and you can also look at where you're spending your assessment dollars on today. So if you have, high cost assessment programs, it might be worthwhile for you to look at proving the ROI for those programs as well. And certainly determine where and what metrics are being collected. I think asking yourself these questions can help prioritize where it maybe makes most sense for you to start. We've got two more questions, time for. One is, how often do you look at metrics? Again, that's another great question, and that's a depends answer. I know not everyone loves the depends answer, but it really depends on if the data is readily accessible and the organizational effort to go get that data, maybe even how often the data is being collected. For example, some of our clients with high volume programs will look at pass rate or adverse impact data monthly or quarterly, whereas other performance metrics might be quarterly or annually. And when you're setting up your assessment analytics program, part of the setup should be to determine not only what you will measure and where that information comes from, but how often should those things be measured. So like I said, things like pass rate, adverse impact, applicant reactions to your process could be measured more frequently, whereas other metrics, especially depending on if you'll take action, might be at a less frequent base. But if you're working with a consultant or company such as PAN that has expertise in this, they can certainly work with you to determine the frequency. I think we have time for one more question. How do you determine the best stakeholders? Again, that's, first determine who is impacted by the assessment process. Like we talked about, it could be the CFO, it could be legal, your recruiters, operations, the L&D team. Chances are you'll have multiple stakeholders, which, I think is a really good thing that, there's many people invested in the outcomes of your assessment program, since these are the hires or the employees that are involved within your organization. So again, you'll have multiple stakeholders, and all of those should have really great input along, not during implementation, but also during the life cycle of your assessment program. Well, great. Thank you so much for those questions, and thank you for your time today. I really hope this session was useful not only to understand the importance of assessment, what type of assessments are out there, but really beyond using that data not only for hiring but for development, what can we do with that assessment to data to become a smarter organization, use that data for continuous improvement within your organization. And I'll turn it back over to Christy.
Thank you, Julie. Great job on this webinar. We are just getting flooded with questions and comments. And if we didn't have the opportunity to answer your question, we will follow up afterwards, and we will get an answer to your question. In addition, we're going to send you a follow-up email, and that will contain the actual PowerPoint presentation from this event in PDF format, and also a recording of this webinar. So we're excited about that, and it's really great to see so much interest in this topic. So as always, feel free to go to panpower.com. Lots of information and resources there. And we hope you enjoyed our webinar today. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon. Bye.
Thank you.